There is much talk about the benefits of Canada implementing a digital ID system for Canadian citizens. It would be more efficient and convenient, but there are concerns about the freedoms and privacy of citizens and potential government overreach. Our guest today joins us from Calgary. John Carpay is the president of the Justice Centre for Constitutional Freedoms. John, welcome back to Bridge City News. Great to have you on again.
Glad to be with you.
Great. So, John, can you first of all explain what digital ID for Canada would entail and how would this function and why are many people wanting to see this happen?
So basically, it's a shift from the paper or hard copy things like your driver's license, your credit card, possibly your passport. Most of us, by the time you're 20 years old, you've got a quarter inch of different cards in your wallet. And so the digital ID is, and you see a lot of it already in place. That people they want to buy a coffee, they want to go to the gym, they just use their phone, and phone gets scanned and blip. You don't even have to take out a credit card to insert your credit card. You've got the quick payment, and it is more convenient. But if it's not done right, it could be extremely dangerous.
Yeah, I would say so. I think one of the worries is government overreach. So, I mean, if I understand it correctly, digital ID would maybe allow governments to know where you've been, what you buy, how you spend your money. Is that true? And if it is the case, then should we trust our government with that information? What's the track record so far for our Canadian government?
Well, 11 months ago, we saw vaccine passports imposed in every province in Canada. And if you were not willing to disclose personal, private medical information to a total stranger at a restaurant or at a gym or at a movie theater, you were very quickly turned into a second-class citizen. So the governments did abuse it with this vaccine passport system, even after the vaccine manufacturers had stated publicly that the vaccine does not stop the spread. And still the government bulldozed ahead and said, well, we got to have vaccine passports. And if you're not injected with the COVID vaccine, or if you refuse to disclose your vaccine status, you're a second-class citizen. You can't go to participate in sports or go to a restaurant. So that was very dangerous. We also saw governments freezing bank accounts earlier this year. So Canadians that donated $50 or $20 to the peaceful truckers protest, suddenly bank account frozen, can't use your credit card. So the track record of governments here in Canada is that they will very aggressively abuse technology to violate our rights and our freedoms and even our property, like the money that we have in the bank.
Yeah, it's pretty scary. I know China is currently using a digital ID system. So maybe can you give us some examples of how China is using, or I guess some would say abusing, the power of digital ID with their citizens?
So China has what's called a social credit system. This is not the political party that used to be in power in BC and Alberta, but credit for good behavior. So if you say something nice about the government on Facebook and say the government's doing a good job, your credits go higher. If you jaywalk, if you cross the street on a red light, there's a centralized national database, and it will take your photo, match up your face to the hundreds of millions of other people, and you'll just get notified on your phone that you are getting fined, and the fine that you have to pay for jaywalking, and your social credit score gets lowered. So if there are people in China who oppose the regime or criticize the regime, they have a lower social credit score. They cannot get onto a train or an airplane or even a bus because everywhere you go, you need to scan that phone, and the QR code tells the bus or the airplane or the train that you can't get on because the government has decided that you're not a good citizen. You've been critical of the government, so you will be punished by being denied access to transportation. So you're going to be confined to within walking distance of your own home.
Oh my
And,
goodness.
even shopping malls require you to flash that digital ID, the electronic ID. Nothing stops Canada from having the same social credit system that communist China has.
That is really scary. Talk about being ostracized too. And I think many would argue that Canada is not China and therefore would not behave that drastically. However, what could this mean for those who maybe don't follow the government line with their opinions, like say with vaccine mandates, like you mentioned before, or attending a protest with the threat of having your bank account frozen or your voting habits, et cetera? What would that mean?
Well, the thing to avoid is the centralization of the data. So it's not abnormal that the government has data about us. For example, the police would, if they know your name and your date of birth, they can do a search, and the police will know whether or not you have a criminal record, and if yes, what crimes you were convicted of. But only the police have that knowledge on a criminal record. Now, doctors have access to a computerized database, and they can look up a patient history of, treatments and surgeries and medications and reports and whatnot. Now, as long as these are separate, we're doing okay. But it becomes a problem if police have access to my medical records, or if the doctor has access to criminal justice and court records. Then you've got a centralization. So, governments to have some data on citizens. Obviously, we have tax records, so governments know, how much money you earn, and you pay income tax. I'm sure for you and for me and for everybody listening, if once you're over 18 or over 25, like the government will have tax records matched up to your social insurance number. Not a problem necessarily. But if governments can know your political opinions by monitoring your Facebook, and if they can know your spending decisions and where you buy, and if you have a GPS tracking device in the phone, so government knows where every citizen is at every time, it's that centralization that is extremely dangerous. And the track record in Canada is very poor. It was less than a year ago that all of us were forced, if we wanted to be first class citizens and just enjoy a normal life, we were forced to disclose personal private medical information about a vaccination status to complete strangers. And if you didn't want to do that, then you were a second class citizen. So we've already been there. I don't know why somebody would not be concerned about the future when we've just had this nightmare only 11 months ago.
Yeah, that's such a. Now, could this digital ID system, John, could it keep track of your views, like your political views or your opinions on certain social issues? Does it have the power to do that?
It's very easy for once things are centralized, right? Which is what we want to avoid. We cannot stop governments from keeping, tax records or police records, or maybe a record of your traffic violations if you get a lot of speeding tickets and your insurance rates go up. We cannot stop governments from having some data on us. But once it's centralized, it becomes very easy for the let's say some human rights commissioner will say, well, we've seen you post things on Facebook or Twitter or on your personal, web page that we deem to be hateful. So, we're going to punish you by uh, denying you access to restaurants or to certain stores. The technology is there, and um, I'm not sure Canada's culture is that different from China's. When we saw, for example, in February, the federal government falsely and without any basis declare a national emergency just because there were some peaceful protesters in Ottawa, and trucks that may have been illegally parked, and on that basis they actually declared a national emergency and froze people's bank accounts. That is Canada.
Wow. John, how far away are we from possibly seeing this digital ID be put into use in Canada? What's the timeline?
Well, you've probably heard the story of the frog in the boiling water, and the story is told. I don't know if it's true, but the story is told that if you toss a frog into hot water it will immediately jump out and it knows there's a danger. But supposedly, if you put the frog in cold water and put the cold water on the stove and then heat it up slowly, the frog will boil to death because it doesn't notice the slow changing in temperature. So I think a full-fledged totalitarian nightmare, could take 2 or 3 years before that becomes a reality. But it's going to be done step by step by step. And the federal government has stated publicly that they want to move ahead with digital ID. So Canadians need to contact their members of parliament and say no to digital ID. And politicians mostly are followers, not leaders. When they hear from the people, they very often will change their minds and will do what the people want.
Okay, so the best thing viewers can do is contact their politicians, their local MPs.
There's a background report, and the information on this is pretty easy to find on the internet. If you Google, what is digital ID, and these sorts of things. Earlier this month, the Justice Centre released a report called Canada's Road to Beijing, and it's on our website at www.jccf.ca. That's Justice Centre Constitutional Freedoms, jccf.ca. And the report is there that kind of goes through what digital ID is and how it's dangerous.
Okay, thanks for that, John. I'm going to switch gears here for a second here because we're looking at back to school really quickly. Now, can you give us maybe an update on what's happening with some colleges and universities still insisting that students need to be vaccinated in order to attend classes? Any updates there?
The Justice Centre has taken several colleges and universities across Canada to court over the trying to pressure young, healthy adults into last year was 2 shots, and now they're actually pressuring young, healthy adults who are not threatened by COVID to get a booster shot, like a 3rd shot. And this is just absolutely outrageous because the vaccine manufacturers have said publicly that the vaccine does not stop the spread. So it should just be a personal decision. And there's more and more evidence is coming out about the harmful effects of vaccines, such as myocarditis. If you're a healthy 20-year-old, your risk of harm from the vaccine could be higher than your risk from COVID, but that's a decision that every individual should make for him or herself. These are publicly funded, taxpayer-funded institutions, and we're representing students to take them to court over these policies.
Okay, interesting. And John, also the Justice Centre has also launched a court application alleging that Alberta's Chief Medical Officer, Dr. Dina Hinshaw, withheld information regarding Alberta lockdowns.
Yeah, the Justice Centre filed a court action in late 2020 against the Alberta government, seeking to challenge lockdowns for violating our rights and freedoms. The government successfully stalled on presenting evidence, but when we finally got Chief Medical Officer Dr. Dina Hinshaw. We were cross-examining her, questioning her under oath in April of 2022. So the government stalled very successfully for a year and a half. She said that she had no knowledge, no evidence of masks harming school children, when it was her policies that it was mandatory for children in schools, even elementary school kids had to wear masks. Now, in a different court action, it became clear that the Alberta government had a memo that was written to Dr. Dina Hinshaw and to Premier Kenney, and it was a memo that said that there's not much evidence that masks are useful, and there is evidence that they could be very harmful for children for their social development, their mental, their psychological, their emotional development. And yet, when Dina Hinshaw was questioned in the Justice Centre's court action, she said she had no knowledge of any, negative reports. It appears that she lied under oath, and so we are reopening the court case to ask her more questions and follow up. and try to get to the bottom of this. I mean, did she lie to the people of Alberta and to the court when she said that she had no knowledge of harmful effects of masking?
Okay, interesting. Should be very interesting to see what happens there. John, thanks so much for being with us today. Appreciate having you on.
Thanks for having me on your show. Much appreciated.
Absolutely. John Carpay is the president of the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms.